Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this GNF session on Moonlight, Connecting Earth with the Moon. I would like to introduce you to Elodie Viau. Elodie is our Director for Telecommunications and Integrated Applications, and will introduce this session to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elodie Viau. I'm the Director for Telecommunication and Integrated Application at the European Space Agency. It is a pleasure to be here with you today to discuss our key topic, one of the key projects, where we are together with the Director of Navigation, Paul Van Hoof, and also with the Director of Human Robotic and Exploration, that is not there today with us, but very close to this project that we are leading together, which is called Moonlight. Moonlight is going to be, I will give you a short introduction of the project, and then we will have our panelists, and we will be able to exchange, and please feel free also to reach us afterwards with any question. And after this session, we have the concluding closing remark from Paul. So before talking about Moonlight itself, I would like to briefly remind you the context. And for that, I will ask the next slide. Yes. I don't know how to get to the next slide. Oh. Okay. Okay. So the moon is a perfect place to practice space exploration. So we are now seeing a strong endeavor of going back to the moon. And this time is to, thank you. This time is to stay there. So there is many projects, lander, rover, and also having the human back to the moon. And in contrast to the first time where we went to the moon a few decades ago, this time is a permanent return to the moon with a different set of requirements, in particular, an emphasizing on the cost effectiveness to really have sustainable and affordable mission. So if we, no? So this is a great opportunity of having those missions planned to the moon. I don't know if you have been circling around the forum and the various booths of our industrial partners. We see a lot of those missions. We see a lot of the moon on this exhibition. For me, it was a clear message that there is indeed this endeavor of going back to the moon. We see a wave of mission, and every mission needs naturally communication and telecommunication feature. So what we can do through Moonlight is to find a way that we do this return to the moon with navigation and telecommunication in a cost-efficient way. Instead of having each mission carrying their own navigation and telecommunication system, we want to be able to provide a system that they can use and therefore lower down the barrier cost to those missions, making sure that we have a cheaper solution for the mission. In addition to that, it can create opportunities for new services to contribute to the sustainable moon economy. A bit similar to what has happened around the Earth, the fact to have communication and navigation allow the development of many services done to Earth, the economy, the Earth economy, and in a similar way, the moon economy will be driven and fostered by the capability of having those services, being able to have the rovers and navigating around the moon, and also the people being able to communicate on the moon, but also communicate back to Earth. With this in mind, at the European Space Agency, we have launched this initiative of Moonlight that is focused on igniting those new services. And to do that in a partnership mode, we want to be, as the agency, to act as an anchor customer. So there is a key function. So we have listed some key functions, and you will be very familiar with them because that's the ones that you are using here on Earth. So typically, for the communication function is to be able to communicate, having a mission data transfer, teleoperation, but also audio and video streaming. So really to have communication services that allow to exchange information, exchange data, and to be able to build on those data, to be able to communicate voice and data and video, and to be connected. And for the navigation, it is the same services that what you are using here on Earth to know where you are, your absolute position, but also at which speed you are going and where you need a clock and a universal timing. So exactly like when you are using Galileo on Earth to navigate, those rovers on the moon and the people located on the moon will be able to circulate on the surface with the same function. All those two combined, the telecommunication and the navigation, will be able to create value-added services. Going further in the application domain, being able to have capabilities such as alerting and informing, having the search and rescue in case of on the surface of the moon something is happening, but also developing new type of application, and really here is the imagination, your imagination is the only limit, to be able to have downstream that you can also, from Earth, someone that is not able to reach the moon is able to communicate and participate to the experience of the people going in the moon in the future. Also having entertainment, video game using this experience in virtual reality, education, and many other domains. We can talk about also the media, the importance of the moon to be able to observe from the moon the Earth, being able to monitor, as we say, from the ISS, the planet Earth is making people change their view on Earth, and from the moon we hope that it will make the same impact. So now I'm just going to provide you the roadmap of the project. So the Moonlight project is composed of two key elements. We want to go fast. We want to go with the first Lunar Pathfinder that is currently planned for launch in 2024. So the development is ongoing through SSTL satellite that Nelly is representing today. And then we have the Pathfinder services that will be deployed just after 2024. We have the Moonlight constellation, which is the second element of the Moonlight project that is currently under design with two consortium of industrial partners. And then after the ministerial CM22, so the ministerial is where we want to facilitate this adventure by getting some additional public financing, and to be able to, just after that, kick the development and the manufacturing of this constellation in order to launch as early as possible in 2026 or end of 2025 and initiate services then. So we are moving forward together with the Director of Navigation, with the Director of Human Robotic Exploration, and myself, towards presenting this challenging proposal with our partners, with the industry, to achieve this. What is important is what are the use cases, because one of the key challenges of this program is a bit the eggs and chicken situation, where we need to develop the technology in order to be able to bring the services, but we also need from the beginning to think about the user in order that it materializes. So it's in a commercial way, we need to really have the various use cases and to foster all those use cases together. So having a partnership with across all space agencies, what we know how to do the best in space is to partner all together across the various countries in order to achieve the goal. So we are partnering with NASA, we are partnering with JAXA, with ISRO. We are in discussion to make sure that the system that we are developing can be open and operate on their rover, their mission. In addition to that, we are looking at the private lunar companies, which are also the startup SME ecosystem, but also the bigger players that have mission in place and planning future mission on the Luna, because we don't want to develop a system without user. We want the user to know which system and which capabilities they will be able to use and give us their requirement. Finally, we are looking also at the future and the end user. I was talking to you about education, entertainment, marketing, logistics. all those non-space sectors need to be involved from the beginning with us, so they can give us ideas, can give us innovation, and partner with us. So this concept is very much an open system. So we are also discussing with NASA in the spirit of their LunarNet initiative in avoiding that the system cannot be interoperable. So we are really working hand-to-hand with the other space agency. And I think the last slide, I want to encourage you. The team has created this QR code in order for you to use this QR code and to be able to, as a potential user, give us your view, your interest, your requirement, your thinking, because without this user community, we will not be able to achieve the Moonlight project altogether. I will leave the floor, and please contact the team for Moonlight. I turn to Luca Del Monte for opening the panel and the discussion with our partners.
Thank you very much, Elodie, for this super interesting presentation that is, I think it's raising also a number of questions in the public. So let me introduce this panel that is quite conspicuous, as you can see. I mean, we are a number of distinguished guests here and very short time, so we need to be, unfortunately, I will have the very sad duty of call you to the discipline, and because I have a lot of questions for you, so basically we have to stick to the time. Let me introduce you our guest today. Just next on my left, there is a colleague of mine, Fabrice Joly, who is actually the project manager of the ESA Moonlight initiative, and is also the head of the future telecom program consolidation in the Telecom and Integrated Application Directorate at ESA. Next to him, we have Julien Alexandre Lamamy, that is the managing director at iSpace. And iSpace is one of the leading companies worldwide on lunar rover technology and in resources exploitation on celestial bodies. Next to him, there is Timo Staffler, that is Director of Business Development and responsible for new programs at OHB. Next, there is Nelly Oxford, that is the head of SSTL Exploration Business. And of course, she represents one of the two companies that have been recalled by Elodie, is active in developing and in studying, this infrastructure. Next to it, we see Dan Hendrickson, that is from Astrobotics. That is an impressive company who has already 2 lunar lander missions and more than 15 lunar payloads customer to date in the backlog. Elodie, I don't introduce you again, of course. And last on the line, I think Ken Gers, that is the program manager of the Moonlight project for the second company, that is Telespazio. I think it's Telespazio Germany in this case. Telespazio altogether. And last but not least, it's Paul Verhoef, that director of navigation, again, another colleague of mine at ESA. So we would like to understand a little bit better from two sides. I mean, these panelists have not been chosen randomly. I mean, they represent, 3 of them represent actually the supply side. The supply means, in this case, the realization of the infrastructure, and the 3 others represent potential customers. So here today we would like to understand better with them how it works and in which way this infrastructure can push the frontier of space economy, from the LEO Earth orbit to the cislunar, the lunar, and maybe, who knows, even to the frontier of the solar system. So I would like to start from Fabrice to have maybe some impact about what is the ESA approach? Because Elodie mentioned a number of elements, but maybe you can give us some in-depth insight. What is the ESA approach for the development of this COM and NAV infrastructure?
Thank you, Luca. Can we hear me? Yeah. And good afternoon, everyone. Well, maybe to start answering this question, it might be useful to say what Moonlight is not about. And the Moonlight initiative is not about an ESA infrastructure operated by ESA for the needs of ESA. And I'm saying this because this could be a very legitimate assumption that people make when they hear about an initiative from the European Space Agency. What Moonlight is about the development of services. And to some extent, the infrastructure associated to these services is only a means to an end. And the end is very much services, comms and nav services to be provided by the private sector. Now, how we get there is the interesting part. We have, as mentioned earlier, a bit of a chicken and egg situation between users having to commit to using the system that is yet to be built, and the system to be built on the assumption that we have users who have yet to commit. So the approach of ESA to tackle this is actually to act as an igniter and a starting effect. And we see our role in two main areas, supporting the infrastructure deployment and acting as a first customer, in fact, in order to start it all off. Eventually, what we want to happen is that service provider, that private sector providing those services, is going to sell these services to anyone wishing to get those services, making money out of it, and reaching a state of full sustainability. And that's what we want to go for.
Thanks, Fabrice. Nelly, one question straightforward for you. I mean, it's not the ESA traditional approach. No, it's working automatically. You don't have to touch anything. It's activated. But this is not the ESA traditional approach. It's clear. How do you see this? I mean, from your side.
Well, from my side, and echoing what Fabrice was saying, but from the industrial point of view, this commercial partnership approach is quite novel. We are pioneering it on our side on Lunar Pathfinder, which was the first step of the Moonlight that Elodie mentioned. Again, well, we're quite obsessed with the chicken and the egg here, but I'm going to take it in a different way. As far as industry is concerned, the chicken and the egg is that to be able to make money and develop a commercial service on the moon, we need to make an investment. But we need to make an investment knowing that there will be purchase of the services. And what the commercial partnership allows is a certain level of certainty for industry that the services are going to be used so that we can make the investment, taking a risk, of course, but a risk that we can take in order to open a new economy and then develop the commercial aspects of it on the basis of an institution like ESA providing a minimum assurance that the service is going to be used and the will and belief of industry that there is a market behind it.
Okay, I will come back to you because you also ranked me a bell, but I have another question for Ken maybe, because here we are talking about bringing down, let's say, in some way opening a new market. New market, one of the elements, let's say, of the market is the price and the price you build on the costs. So do you have, what is your strategy? Let's say, what are your ideas to bring down the cost for the realization of this?
I mean, if you take a parallel with what happened on Earth, connectivity and data consumption is going to explode when the lunar economy is really developing. So what we have, of course, in mind long-term is an economy of scale. We have to develop an infrastructure which allows that if every user that is going to the moon, what is the case now, needs to rely on Earth-based infrastructure, working out its own solutions, it comes at the cost that we're working at now. So what we're trying to do in terms of strategy-wise is develop an approach which will put in place an infrastructure that will be able to scale with the future needs. Of course, we have to be realistic and pragmatic, and the initial deployment needs to be compatible with the initial market and also the investment, as Nelly mentioned it, that industry can commit to, relying on an ESA as an anchor customer and a potential commercial market developing. But that is then what we need to do and basically have this infrastructure and the economy of scale allowing us in the end for the user, the end user, to have a more price competitive offer. That's very much communication focused. There's of course the second aspect, which is the navigation. And there let's say the value proposition is that compared with the current conventional way of developing your navigation system, that you have it on your lander, for example, on your orbiter, we need to have a lower mass because we can rely on a navigation signal. So lower mass, of course, will have an impact on the end customer side because it will be less costly. And what we have to do now, and this is the exercise that we're going through, is develop a sustainable business model on that. So on the company side, like what kind of infrastructure do we have to put in place, how many assets, what kind of technologies in order to be able to basically drive that cost down and have it on a profitable way on our side.
Yeah, okay, thanks Ken. Fabrice, I mean, this guy needs to go very quickly to the moon. So let's say I think that time here is an essential and key element, no? Money, time is money in business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you have a question?
What do you think? I mean, how is the agency, let's say, reacting to this? I mean, what are the framework that you are putting in place?
Well, I think Elodie has laid out the plan, right? In a slide earlier, we as you know, we operate in a cycle of ministerial, putting the money in the INSA institution to do projects. So we already have a contract in place with SSTL. We're launching a satellite in 2024. It's called Lunar Pathfinder, and there's a reason for that name. It is a pathfinder, showcasing services. So I think we are convinced ourselves that it just makes sense to outsource those functions of and replace those bespoke navigation and communication expensive systems into services to be provided to those missions. So it does make sense, but it is a challenge to make it happen. When you talk to a potential user, and there's a few of them there, I think it's easy to get them interested. It's another story to get them to commit to actually using it, right? And I think this is again, this chicken and egg situation. I think this is what makes it legitimate for us to intervene and just start it all off. So yes, time is of essence. We've already started, and we have a bigger plan. And the bigger plan is indeed a full constellation, maybe in a let's say step deployment action or way, and off we go. We get the ministerial running, and we start the contract 2023, and we have services 2026, 2027. But we do believe we need to help out.
Nelly, you mentioned private-private partnership before. I mean, this kind of, I mean, it's for many years there have been also jokes about this acronym of PPP. So let's not even mention them again. But it's a PPP scheme. Actually, is a scheme of sharing risks and rewards. In your opinion, how do you see this share, and what could be the rewards for the public sector, by the way? I'm curious to learn about that. I see the risks, but I'm representing the public part also. I'm not totally neutral, I must admit, but if you can elaborate about this share.
Okay, well, I'll start with the obvious, the here and now, the more pragmatic one, and of course the risks. So there's an element of risk sharing on the market uptake. So that's what ESA and industry are taking hand in hand together. So that's the obvious one. Then if you're thinking of a service element rather than in traditional procurement, then there is a shift of risk from the public sector toward the private sector, because in an extreme case, ESA wouldn't even have to look at what the solution is in terms of technical and programmatic. They would just look at whether the service is there or not. So that's the second element. In terms of reward, well, obviously, a commercial partnership has to be more interesting economically from a cost perspective for the institution and therefore for the public service. So that's an obvious one as well. But what I would like to push is a little bit further, is when we're thinking about the implication of industry and what it means in terms of penetration of the skills and industrial capabilities within each of the delegations, it is much more powerful to have industry as a prime being supported and seeded by institutional funding, especially when we're talking about an economy that's emerging and fairly reliant today on institutional money, so that's obvious. But we are starting to develop a real economy that's based on commercial capabilities and industrial knowledge. And then if I push it even further, what I think is going to happen, and the sign that we will be there, is when ESA will withdraw from being a partner to being a customer, and when space is not at the service of the Earth, but we are entering an economy of space for space, meaning that there are a number of industrial actors, like the landers, for instance, the rockets, human habitation, all the infrastructure around, mining companies and entertainment, cinemas, whatever. And we are starting to make contracts between industry to industry for space services generated in space and utilized in space.
This was not an easy one, I admit, so you did it well, very well. But you pointed a lot, you talked a lot and elaborated a lot about, of course, because I asked you about the role of public and public rewards on that, but let's say, there is an elephant in the room here, it's clear. Where is the private investment? I mean, we're not going to support these things forever. I mean, we are maybe an anchor customer, I don't know, a first customer for sure. Anchor, I'm not really that sure, maybe, but are private investment attracted, are risk capitals attracted by this initiative?
Interesting question. If we do our job properly, whatever I'm going to answer now, hopefully will be wrong, because I can give you obvious examples of companies that are going to invest, but in my view, ideally, if we implement everything successfully, 5 years, let's say 10 years from now, there will be investments done by private companies that we can't think about now. Because then we have been successful in lowering the barriers for non-space companies to enter the lunar economy. Helped starting, of course, with the launchers, as Nelly said, and the transportation providers, so that private companies see business opportunities. Non-space companies see business opportunities for them in the lunar ecosystem. And with connectivity, with navigation, with transportation, everything matches, so that from their financial point of view, it makes sense to do that investment. And that is, I think, really our challenge. It will not, so that is really my main message. I hope that, let's say, if we're having this panel 10 years from now, there will be things happening that we can't think about today.
Dan, I see you were nodding. He's saying true. I mean, do you really see customers coming? I mean, you represent now we move to the supply, to the demand side. So you are the one that is in contact with final users. I mean, I know that your company, I mean, is boosting really an impressive backlog. I think one of the largest one worldwide anyway. So can you tell us something about the use case that you see popping up there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it was mentioned about investment being maybe the question. In my mind, it's actually, I think, going to be more about sales, because I think that's what's coming. You know, we've got the sales that we have right now. We're 2 of 6 U.S. lunar lander missions that are on contract right now. And, you know, in thinking about this panel, I realized that there's actually more data relay assets in place for Mars than there is for the moon right now. Which is kind of breathtaking to think about, because the moon is right in our backyard. For us, I think once we have these assets in place, we're going to be able to access new parts of the moon that right now are very difficult for us to access with the kind of data rates that we need. So when you think about sales and customers, things like going after potential water ice resources at the poles, those are exciting and promising opportunities that aren't necessarily happening tomorrow, but they are on the horizon. And they're going to need a lot of data relay, and they're going to need PNT, and it's going to require a significant amount of assets to be in place to make that happen. But right now, we just don't have those capabilities in place. So we've started with the initial sales we've got. We've got the 2 lunar lander missions booked and on contract right now. And we build on that with additional missions, but those missions are going to have data needs that only a program like Moonlight and similar sorts of systems can provide us in order to really realize that promise.
Thanks, Dan. Timo, I mean, this was maybe an American perspective. OHB is definitely involved in a project, a very important project for a lunar lander with ESA, with Europe. I mean, do you share this view of the lunar economy, or I mean, will ESA mission have the similar requirements as the one just described from more a commercial perspective?
So first, let me say I have two hearts in my breast, so to say, from OHB side. On one side, on the customer side, with the lunar landing stories, but also on the communication side, where we're also involved in the Telespazio team. So, but today, and your question relates to the lunar lander part. And I must say, it's really an interesting time today, because somehow you have to start your investment, and then you rely on a market which has to catch up as soon as possible. So from our side, from OHB side, we have also in the lunar landing area, two areas. One is a commercial lunar lander, and therefore I know very well what Nelly, for example, described. It's a PPP program. That's a new story, really, setting it up in the exploration program lines. But for us, on the lunar landing side as a customer, the market is much closer, because if we can close our business plan already after 2 missions or something like this, the non-recurring being covered after the second mission in a PPP program. And for us, this is a very interesting service to be offered, but it has to be proven that at the end of the day, it's a more cost-efficient one, so that the navigation part is covered in that context, and also the communication part is a benefit to have it with a Moonlight story. So it's a little bit a critical question, but I think this is really something we have to show, and from our side, we're super open. And EL3 is surely also then, but it comes 2029. So you have to really stay from today, so to say, until 2029, until really recurrings are expected. So it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. I mean, it will happen, but it must happen timely enough to get you recurring money.
Understood. It's good that you are starting to talk about timing, because also the last slide that was presented by Elodie was about the roadmap. So now, I mean, just Julien Alexandre, for you, let's say, how do you see this roadmap for the space, for the lunar economy evolution? I mean, are we in phase? I mean, are we keeping the right pace, we at ESA, with our project?
I can share our pace, and we can see if it matches the ESA pace. We'll launch our first lander next year. So talking about investments, it's 40 private investments, $200 million invested in iSpace for this mission. And this lander will just do the 2 weeks of operations before the lunar night. So not the best fit for an architecture like Moonlight. So then it comes to discussion of how do we fit Moonlight with our surface assets like a lander. This would be at the earliest, I think, 2024, when the Denver office will launch our next generation lander, the Series 2, 500 kilograms of payload capacity and lunar night survival. With lunar night survival, now it gets interesting. See, okay, can we have long-term customers on our lander that need to regularly return data back to Earth using an architecture like Moonlight? I'll talk for Luxembourg, iSpace Luxembourg. We have an office in Tokyo, Luxembourg, and the US. I represent Luxembourg. We do the lunar rovers there. So the question of Moonlight for rovers becomes interesting, because right now for our first missions, we'll be limited by the RF communication range to the landers. We use the lander as the relay back to Earth for communication. If we had Moonlight, we could adventure a little farther outside of the range of the lander. But then I also need to integrate my autonomy development and have that fancy software on my rovers. So I think it's a very interesting question to see the chicken and egg. We hear that often. It's not just for investments; it's also for technology. How can we use Moonlight, and which enable switch? Is it the surface users accelerate the Moonlight development, or the opposite? But I think we have a little time to figure it out.
Let's come back to, I'm always also fascinated by the US market, because it's usually very, let's say, it reserves always surprise. I know, and that maybe you cannot disclose the name of some of the customers you have. Certainly, I'm still curious to understand which type of customers they are, in which areas they are more interesting, which part of the moon they would like to explore, and to do what. And let's say, if there is also, I'm curious to know if there is anyone that is coming from the non-space traditional domain. Say, if you can elaborate, yeah, please.
Yeah, so right now, we're similar in our ConOps in that we use our lander to do direct-to-Earth communications. So that pretty much negates the entire far side of the moon for us until there are relay services and capabilities. So that's one. Another is, regardless of the customer, everybody wants more data. Whether it's science, they need more measurements, whether it's the highest definition video possible, or images. Space cameras or cameras for space are getting better and better, and it's really impressive some of the capabilities that you can do with that, and there's a lot of really interesting applications for multimedia companies and networks and a variety of non-traditional space players, but they don't, the limiting factor there is the pipe to get the data back for them, and so that's a major constraint, and Relay can really help with that in a significant way. It's a challenge right now to really meet the expectations of the non-space market, because when you watch, even just basic television now, it's just far better in quality of anything that we can deliver, at least right now, with the lack of a relay capability that's comprehensive and offers higher data rates. So we think about that quite a bit. Another aspect is, while most lunar landers right now can't survive the lunar night, that's going to change. Over time, we're going to have landers that will be providing presence for months, if not longer, on the surface. Again, that really extends the challenge of data, not just because users are operating on those timescales, but also it implies then that assets can actually go and maybe even leave the initial landing site and travel great distances away from where they started. But again, because of the current model of having to use the lander to do direct-to-Earth, it really severely limits. In most cases, you're looking at maybe a few kilometers of distance at which maybe a rover could travel before it loses range. So it really changes the entire sort of expectation set, because again, the non-space community believes that you can do a lot more than you really can technically right now, and the PNT and the data relay services really change the nature of what's possible then.
Thanks, Dan. Coming back to Europe, Timo, OHB has quite a reputation for being an innovative company that is also exploring new concepts. How do you see the role of OHB in the development of and in the use of this architecture?
Yeah, we picked up the challenge. There's people say large system integrators are not capable to really move, and pick up new space approaches and new ways. But inside our company, we really started also to see for alternative approaches, and this is the called PPP program. So we have an ELSAS on its way. And it's also fun to see that if the ECSS is not applied finally, what you can achieve by experience gained from other programs, and then really push in certain developments. But we do this because we see that there's really an upcoming market in the lunar economy. We really believe in this, and you see it if you look in this conference or on a global scale. There's a lot of programs that are really targeting to the moon, and I think this is really exploration is a topic that's a global topic. It will happen. It's just a question when and how intense, but this train will move, and we want to participate there, and we want to participate on a cost-efficient basis. And in that sense, the Moonlight is really an opportunity, firstly, from the navigation point of view, clearly, but also in the future when there's more programs coming and more landers coming, where we are also try to be involved in by bridging the gap between 2023, 2024 until 2029, when institutional landers come and really offer opportunities there. So for us, I think it's a challenging future to build cost-efficient smaller lunar landers. So we are talking about 100 kilogram payload capability, landing capability, to bridge this gap, to learn from there, and then also possibly influence the larger programs. So that's something where we are really after.
Yeah, very clear. Julien Alexandre, last question is for you. Let me, last element of curiosity on my side for a potential user. I mean, we are deploying an infrastructure, but my point is, do we accelerate your business case in some way? Is there an acceleration? Is there something that is improving the speed at which you think to start to make revenues thanks to that?
I sincerely hope so, because after transportation, I think communication is the main infrastructure connecting Earth to the Moon. Today, I sit on the customer side of the panel. I hope very soon to be the supplier of the transportation service to send to the Moon all those communication satellites built in Europe on the lander that's currently also being assembled and tested in Europe, in Germany. So this is where I think we can really have the synergies between developing a transportation architecture, communication architectures, with assets being built in Europe, and really, accelerate that lunar exploration business in Europe. And then what would be interesting also to see is how we can replicate what seems right now a very successful model for Moonlight, PPP or commercial partnership, whatever, through transportation also. Again, there's landers now available for Europe to launch payloads to the Moon before ER3 would come to play. So why aren't we thinking also about commercial partnerships for transportation? Why aren't we thinking about commercial partnerships for building habitats, where ESA would position themselves as a procurer of a completed habitat or a power station, other services?
Excellent. Well, everything is clear to me, but in order to have things even clearer, I would like to ask Paul maybe if you can draw the conclusion. I mean, just that we're all on the same page, that you can tell us what you think, what you have learned out of these discussions. Please, Paul.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Maybe a few words from my side. As you've seen, there is quite some interest. I think it is important in our minds that we move forward, that we try to project a bit what the opportunities are and where this is going. If I can refer to an event which was quite an illustration to us, I invited to my team a few years ago a visit of Brad Parkinson, who was at the time the chief engineer of GPS in the 60s. And Brad obviously is an elderly statesman almost sort of type. And the most important question to Brad was, what did you have in mind when the system was developed in terms of its usage? And he told us, well, we had to find that a number of thousands of military equipment would be equipped with this. And this was sort of the market we had in front of us. Well, look at where we are today. We have 2 billion people using GPS and Galileo combined. 2 billion people with navigation opportunities everywhere. Our whole economy has become dependent on it. The whole of the logistics sector, if some of this would fall apart, a major economic crisis would occur. In the UK, they have done some investigations, some studies on this. They came to the conclusion that if satellite navigation in the UK would fail for a day, there would be an economic damage of £1 billion. £1 billion. Just to give you a size of the potential opportunity. With the Moon, I think for the moment we will be a bit more modest, but even with all that modesty, there is quite an opportunity. So if we think to look forward in this, if you imagine that we are going to indeed go on from what was just said, we're going to go to the notion of an habitat, of a village and all the rest, we have to come to an understanding together on how we're going to do that. The current navigation accuracy on the Moon is rather low. The accuracy, depending a bit on how it is done, is somewhere between 500 meters and 5 kilometers. We think that with Moonlight, the studies we've done internally show that we can bring that down to a landing accuracy of 20 meters. You know, if for safety reasons you're going to have to land your landers 5 kilometers apart because otherwise you may get into trouble, then obviously you quickly get off the sort of out-of-range situations, and this village you are trying to construct is going to be very complicated. So if you want to be able to land in much closer, you're going to have the precision to do that. And so this is what we are trying to offer. Obviously then, the rovers, all the equipment, everything which is going to be there, you want to connect up, you want to have your scientific data, your remote control of it, your video data, all the rest. For rovers, you want to know where they are going. So we're going to have to construct all this infrastructure, and this is what we've set out to do. I think in ESA we have between the telecoms and integrated applications directorate and the navigation directorate, we have all the knowledge in-house and in industry for that in Europe to know what is required for this. We will be able to do it. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The question is, of course, what about the use side? We have had contacts with a number of our colleague space agencies, both in Europe but also internationally, in particular NASA, of course, to work out what would be the use cases for the foreseen, let me say, next decade or so of institutional missions. This is one thing. We have reached out to the very first commercial private sector companies who are trying to go there. But we really want to have a constant, structured dialogue with the users. So one of the things I want to bring to you now, we are going to create a user forum where we're going to have this discussed for all those who want to work with us, who can tell us what they have in mind, what their expectations are, under what conditions they would want to see, what's happening. And of course, we're going to have to, as was said, scale up the system in step by step. But we do need to know where we think this is going. We need to go in the right direction. So an understanding of the use cases nearby or in the future is going to be very important, and we will want to structure that discussion with all those around the globe who are interested in this, whether they are private sector companies, agencies, NGOs, or others who think that they have something to contribute to that. The other thing we're going to do, we're going to put out a call for ideas, because we want to know what people actually are going to use this for. What do they think they're going to be able to do if we put these types of infrastructures in place? What sort of ideas would emerge from this? What do they think that we should be doing? What does this enable it? So we want to really people to start being creative, look at the future, and come to us with, we think this and that should be done on the moon, so that also that is an input to us in order to understand where we need to take Moonlight. So we're very excited about this, because this is really new. We have worked successfully very long in Europe, very much experience with industry on doing very sophisticated telecommunication satellites. We have put Galileo in place. It works fantastically well. As you will know, we provide an accuracy at the moment between 60 and 75 centimeters. And we are about to go to 20 centimeters in the next years, and hopefully beyond that. But obviously, and all of this on the basis of a very small chip in your smartphone. Obviously, this expectation of how this is going to work is going to exist on the moon as well. Paul, if you're able to provide 50 centimeters or 20 centimeters on Earth, why are you giving me 5 kilometers on the moon? This will not work. So we're going to, and this is, to be honest, quite a nice challenge, and we think we can meet it. We're going to do it with industry. We're going to try and step up, go in the right direction, see how this can be done, and help all of those who are going to develop this lunar economy, the lunar activities, the lunar science, so that we can support all of that in the next years. Once more, here is your access to the QR code for the survey. From our side, all of us are available to discuss with, either bilaterally or openly in the fora we are setting up. We are very much looking forward to this. We have great hopes that our political masters will approve the program at the end of next year at the ministerial of ESA, and from there we go immediately. Thank you very much.
And I think that this concludes discussion. So thanks to this distinguished panel. Thanks. And wish you a very good afternoon. Thank you.